Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of The Power You Have. I'm your host, Pramila Jayapal, and I'm just thrilled to have you here. This podcast is to remind each of us, in good times and bad, just how much strength, influence, and potential lives within you. It is to talk to interesting people who have actually used that power and to see how they feel about the world, how they tap into that power, even in the worst times, and to help you tap into yours as well. Last week, we had the magnificent former chair of the FTC, Lina Khan, as our guest, talking about taking on the corporate monopolies that plague our current system and drive prices of everything up for Americans. This week, I'm going to talk to Rocío Sáenz, Secretary-Treasurer at SEIU International and an organizer for immigrant, worker, and racial justice for decades, about her work and her advice for us in this moment of terrifying attacks on immigrants of all legal statuses. But before that, let me just do a quick rundown of President Trump's unconstitutional actions in Iran last weekend. Just to note, we are recording this on Wednesday evening. I want to start with our Constitution. Article 1, Section 8, Clause 11 of the United States Constitution states that Congress has the sole power to declare war. That means that the president must come to Congress to get authorization for any act of war. On Saturday, after Congress had gone home, Trump violated the Constitution. He sent U.S. B-2 stealth bombers into Iranian airspace to drop bombs on Iran's nuclear facilities. Now, I want to be clear about a few things. Presidents on both sides of the aisle have used all kinds of excuses to avoid Congress, and I have been consistent in calling them all out, from Presidents Bush and Trump to Presidents Obama and Biden. And in fact, across the board, there have been a small number of both Democrats and Republicans who are consistent on this point. The president cannot unilaterally commit an act of war against another country and enter the United States into hostilities. Full stop. That undermines our Article 1 powers as Congress. And over again, from the Vietnam War to the invasions of Iraq and Afghanistan, we have seen how so-called limited strikes have kept us embroiled in endless wars. They've led to the deaths of tens of thousands of American troops, and they have made Americans less safe. That is why the framers of the Constitution took so much care to authorize only Congress to declare war, to have a strong and forceful debate on the floor of the House and the Senate so that the American people could understand what is happening, so that there could be thoughtful discussion about the opportunities or consequences of engaging in military action against any country, so that taxpayers would know that their dollars would not be spent on military action abroad instead of bringing down costs at home, so that before we send our sons and daughters into war and devastate American families or put our troops stationed overseas at risk, there is real debate. Let me be clear. There has been zero evidence that showed any imminent threat to America. We should be working on ensuring that Iran does not develop nuclear weapons. In fact, on nuclear non-proliferation around the world. But bombing has never been the way because you cannot simply just bomb knowledge. Multiple U.S. presidents on both sides of the aisle have considered strikes against Iran to destroy nuclear facilities, but they haven't done it. They've listened to their military commanders who tell them that this is not the way forward. Negotiated agreements that provide weapons inspections, that is the way forward. And in fact, that's exactly what Barack Obama negotiated and Donald Trump pulled us out of in his first presidency. And to Trump's credit, not something I give lightly, it seemed like he was starting to engage in negotiations with Iran that could have gotten us to another negotiated agreement, even after pulling us out of the first one. So I thought that was some progress and the correct path for us to be on. But then he got enthralled and he conducted these unconstitutional strikes without coming to Congress, without any imminent threat to the United States from Iran. Now, he's lying about having, quote, obliterated the nuclear sites, when our own intelligence reports are saying that at most we set back nuclear production by months, not even years. Now we've given Iran the incentive to go back to developing nuclear weapons quietly without any inspections. and the long-term consequences to national security are severe. Trump has clearly said this isn't about nuclear weapons. He says it's about regime change. Well, anyone remember the Iraq War? It lasted for 8 years. It cost the lives of thousands of U.S. service members and as many as 66,000 Iraqi civilian deaths. And it took huge amounts of taxpayer dollars away from dealing with healthcare and education right here at home and put it into that endless war. Come on, people. It's time to learn from our mistakes. This is not our war. Trump is pulling us into yet another endless war, and the American people don't want it. That's why I'm an original sponsor of a bipartisan war powers resolution so that we can debate and vote on the floor and reassert Congress's constitutional authority over military action so that wars are not just started on a whim by one person. All right, I want to pivot to today's conversation, which is all about immigration and the intersection with labor and our economy. I've been working on immigration for decades, before Congress, leading a major immigrant rights organization, and then here in Congress as the top Democrat on the immigration subcommittee. And I've been deeply involved in the movements to get humane, fair immigration reform that finally tackles the perils of a system that hasn't been updated to meet our needs in over 30 years. Just imagine that. We are still operating according to the quotas of 30 years ago, even as the population of our own country and the world has changed, even as droughts and war have pushed more and more people to migrate, even as America has continued to attract the talent and innovation of people from all over the world, as employers here in America wink and nod to the need for labor in numerous sectors, but then continue to support an increasingly anti-immigrant Republican Party that has decided to turn immigrants into a political pawn. Now, we are in one of the worst anti-immigrant oppressive regimes against immigrants of all legal statuses, even U.S. citizens. We're seeing masked men kidnapping and disappearing immigrants on the streets simply because Trump doesn't agree with their political views. We're seeing workplace raids that have terrorized immigrants who have been living here for decades and just doing the work. Look, I can go through all the reasons why immigrants are a benefit, not a drain to the United States. Despite the lies, immigrants actually pay enormous amounts into federal, state, and local taxes, including undocumented immigrants. In 2023, undocumented immigrant households paid $89.8 billion into federal, state, and local taxes. In total, immigrant households, both legal and undocumented, contributed nearly $17 in every $100 tax dollars collected, funding the social services that we all rely on, even paying into Social Security that they can never access back. Since our founding as a country, immigration has driven innovation and business creation. Almost 1 in 4 entrepreneurs in the country are immigrants, creating businesses that employ American citizens. And immigrants power just about every sector of our economy, including industries where we have major labor shortages like healthcare. Go into any hospital, any clinic, any nursing home, and you see immigrant doctors, nurses, healthcare workers, janitors, people taking care of the elderly, the sick, the most vulnerable, and the buildings where all of that is housed. And at the very same time that Trump is cracking down on immigrants of every single legal status, we have major labor shortages in our country, in the healthcare sector, the agricultural sector, so many others. The American Hospital Association estimates that by 2028, there will be a shortage of 100,000 critical care workers. These immigrants are helping to curb those shortages and to ensure that people get care in this country when they need it. Americans want a legal system that works. That's what I want. And they and I are frustrated that we don't have it. And the reason we don't have it is because Republicans always stop us from passing humane reforms every single time. Just imagine that back in 2023, more than a decade ago, the U.S. Senate passed a bipartisan immigration reform bill with 68 bipartisan votes. It had money for border security, and it updated the legal pathways so that we could actually legalize the spouses and children of U.S. citizens, create strong pathways for work with strong labor protections to even the playing field for all workers, and ways for families to stay together and take care of each other. But guess what happened? Republicans in the House refused to ever let it come to the floor for a vote because they knew that if they did, it would take immigration off the table as the villains they want to paint us as so they can try to win elections. The number of undocumented immigrants or people coming to the border is directly tied to how many legal pathways we have. There are no longer any meaningful lines to get in. If you are a U.S. citizen married to someone who's undocumented, or if you have U.S. citizen kids with one parent who's undocumented, there's no process. And that's just unfair. And if you're even lucky enough to get one of the very few visas that exist anymore for workers, there's no way to turn many of those into citizenship or certainty for your spouse or your kids even. Now more than ever, Republicans are pinning their political success on anti-immigrant sentiment, lying and trying to turn Americans against immigrants. But once again, just like when they put kids in cages and separated moms from their kids, they are overreaching. And the American people are rising up on all sides of the political spectrum. Here's the thing. Trump lied. He said he would go after the worst of the worst. And instead, he's kidnapping and disappearing people on the streets, conducting workplace raids, stripping people of their legal immigration status, and going after people who have lived in this country for decades as part of our communities and our workplaces. And here's the other thing. 65% of the thousands that have been swept up by ICE have no criminal convictions, and 93% were never convicted of any violent offenses. Trump is ignoring due process and fairness, and he's even ignoring the courts. The number of people who are being kidnapped and disappeared on the way to attend ICE check-ins or immigration court is through the roof. Just a few weeks ago, a man was driving to his ICE check-in with an airline ticket he had purchased to show that he would comply with his deportation order. And guess what? ICE arrested him on the way to his check-in. They pulled him from his car as his pregnant wife begged officers not to take him, and his mother sobbed. This is just wrong. It's also already affecting Americans. It's creating workforce shortages in the food industries that Americans depend on. It's raising food prices and housing prices and making it even more difficult to hire care workers for our family members. And let me be clear, we can have both a functioning immigration system and a secure border. We can invest in protecting this country by reforming the processes to allow immigrants to work and contribute. That is what the American people want, not ignoring the rights and due process of people of all legal statuses, not criminalizing immigrants and profiling them just because of what they look like or where they work. I know we can do it, but it is going to take all Americans using the power you have to speak up and demand humane modernization of our immigration system. And so that's our conversation. Let me bring in our amazing guest, Secretary-Treasurer Rocío Sáenz, into this conversation. Rocío is the Secretary-Treasurer of SEIU International. She represents 2 million members across the country, and she has been an absolute champion on immigrant rights, on workers' rights, and the clear intersection between the two. She also, from 2017 to 2019, directed SEIU's successful Fight for 15 campaign throughout the country to raise the minimum wage. Rocío knows what it means to use the power you have, and we are so fortunate to welcome her here today. So Rocío, thank you so much for joining us. I'm just thrilled to have you on the podcast, and we are both immigrants, and I really think our immigrant stories matter. They matter so much, and they really define who we are and what we fight for. So I wanted to start by asking you just to tell me a little bit about you, how you got to where you are, the top ranks of one of the most powerful unions in the country with over 2 million members in the healthcare and property services and public sector. Tell us about your own journey as an immigrant.
Well, this is, I'm very proud of my immigrant heritage, and probably as you are, Congresswoman. And I actually just feel like immigrants, we all built our nation and we keep our economy strong. And I, about to be 40 years since I came into the US from Mexico. And it's been one of those times that I reflect about coming here for the same hopes and dreams that so many immigrants come for a better life. And I end up, doing some of the odd jobs here and there. And I always tell the story that I went into the Garment Workers Union looking for a seamstress job, and I left with the heart of an organizer. And especially just seeing these immigrant women, garment workers women who they were just say enough. And so it was kind of like my little enter into the new world of immigrants, which is about building a strong communities, a strong workplaces. Then one thing led to another. I ended up in the Justice for Janitors campaign, which was, to me,
One of the most
it was
inspiring in the
what it
country.
gave me.
Yeah.
Oh, I would say that that gave me what I continue to bring with me, the incredible sense of like power that workers have when they come together, join together, and they see se puede, yes, we
Yes.
can, the hopes and dreams when you do that. And to me, was the experience of like workers who, immigrants, most of them, women, most of them, doing the incredible work of cleaning this very, very like, wealthy properties in LA. And they were just say enough to the working conditions that were enduring. And they felt that in order to just bring their hopes and dreams, they needed to just come together and fight together. And especially in the moment that nobody thought that they will do that they will join together. They were immigrants, they were women, they were low wage workers, and they show and they dare to dream and they dare to fight. They went on strike and they won. So to me, I carry that with such a much like pride on what makes me, and the belief that when workers come together, the collective power they have, they can do anything. So that led me to later, years later, I went into Boston to also build the Justice for Janitors campaign. And here we have part-time workers, the same thing, immigrant workers who nobody thought in this place that they were just there to fight, and they did. They went on strike for almost a
Wow.
month, and they won an incredible contract. But not only they won, they built an incredible sense of a community, because what they were saying, it was the community also felt that they were speaking for them. They're speaking in behalf of thousands of workers who didn't have a voice, and they felt very inspired by it. So to me, that's kind of like what bring me in. So then in 2013, I was elected to executive vice president for SEIU, and I focus a lot of the work on the property services workers, on care workers, and then on immigration as well. So I have spent almost three
Wow.
decades helping service and care workers using this collective power, using the way of like you can actually raise standards. And when you do that, you raise standards for everybody, for our communities. So it's been an incredible privilege, and I can't think of a better job. And now, as a secretary treasurer, I feel that I bring in some of that sense of my life experience and my leadership through all these years to a moment that is very, very super important. So I'm just very, humble just to be in this position that continues to fight for workers, for all
Well, it's so
workers.
incredible to listen to you describe that, because this podcast is called The Power You Have. And I can hear in your voice how much it meant to be able to go in with people who many people see workers as powerless, and particularly workers in some of the lower paying jobs before they're unionized. And to just see you describing that collective power that has built and that you have helped shepherd and lead and make space for, and now as the Secretary Treasurer in this very powerful position, what an incredible gift that is. a huge percentage of SEIU's members are immigrants, and actually 20% of the American labor force is made up of immigrants. And so if you want a better economic system that lifts up all workers, tell our listeners, as a union leader now, as the Secretary Treasurer of SEIU, why is immigration so important to achieving that economic system that lifts up all workers? And why is it that all workers benefit from immigrants and a fair immigration system?
Well, this is a very important question, and I see it very simple. When every worker is protected, we are all protected. When every worker is respected, we are all respected. So this is a nation that has been built by the hands of immigrants. Right. Immigrants and refugees have enriched the fabric of our communities, our workforce, and the labor movement from ever. Our union was founded by immigrants over 100 years ago, but that is true everywhere of this nation. So immigrants are essential to our economy. Our work, and when I say our work as immigrants, adds trillions in terms of productivity. We are consumers, we pay taxes, and let me just talk about paying taxes here. Immigrants paid into the Social Security billions, but we also know that they don't take money from it. So that's kind of like one of the myths that we want to just debunk. And of course, immigrants are disproportionately represented in essential sectors like growing and preparing our food, securing and maintaining our buildings and our roads and bridges. And as you know, of course, about 30% of our care work, 30% of our care workforce is made up of immigrants. So here's the question for me is, who will care for our children and seniors? And as you know, we're facing a silver tsunami, and our need for care is only growing. So we don't have nearly enough care workers to meet that demands. So that's where we are. So instead of deporting hardworking people, we should make sure that all working people have rights on the jobs and are able to exercise them without fear or retaliation. Because I want to make sure this is the clear connect. When the entire workforce suffers, when millions of people are struggling to support their families and are afraid to speak up, and they are, we see the fear on the workplace, only serves to increase exploitation for everyone. So everybody suffers.
That's right. And you've brought up so many important points. I mean, you mentioned Social Security, and I think a lot of people don't realize this. If you happen to be a senior citizen on Social Security, undocumented immigrants and documented immigrants have paid into that system so that you can get your Social Security benefits. And actually, undocumented immigrants pay in and never get to take anything out. That's just a really important point that you made, because we're constantly hearing about, as if undocumented immigrants are somehow trying to game the system. The other really important point I think you made is just about how the entire economy suffers, both because we have many folks who are in mixed status families, right? Like undocumented immigrants and U.S. citizens all together. And if you're terrifying an undocumented immigrant, you are definitely also terrifying some U.S. citizens or folks on legal status. And also what happens when the work, whether it's care work or farm work or whatever it is, hospital work, what happens when immigrants are too afraid because this administration is kidnapping and disappearing immigrants of all legal statuses? And so I wanted to get to that point. During the campaign, Trump said, this was his promise, I'm going to deport the worst of the worst, these terrible criminals that are coming in and threatening our families. That's not what has happened at all since he came into office. And you have been, and SEIU have been very involved in a number of high-profile cases, cases that have gotten national attention of immigrants with legal status who have been picked up. And you've even achieved some successes in elevating those cases and getting some of them released. Can you talk about Remesa Ozturk, David Huerta, SEIU labor leader who was arrested during the protests against the ICE raids, or any of your other members who have been affected, who are people with legal status, valid visas, so that our listeners can understand this isn't just about terrible criminals. This is not about that at all. It's really about something that affects all Americans, including immigrants on legal visas.
Well, I want to, before I just go into it, I want to really thank you so much for your support, for your statements, for the work that you have done on behalf of our members to get the release and to get the, just to lift up this craziness that we're living in. So let me just talk about Remesa Ozturk. She's a graduate student at Tufts University on, as you mentioned, a student visa, and a proud member of SEIU Local 509. And she was a major turning point for our movement. I mean, we saw this violent arrest by masked agents, and that went viral, making clear the link on immigrant justice and everyone's free speech. She wrote something that the administration didn't like, and just for that, she was held in Louisiana for over a month. And after weeks of high-profile solidarity actions that you mentioned, including rallies in Boston and New York City and Washington, D.C., the judge ordered her release. We were very grateful that Remesa was freed and she's home where she belongs. And this was a giant relief for our movement, especially because this victory showed the power of our collective actions. And then we saw the arrest of our...
She wrote an op-ed that the administration didn't like. So they sent masked men to disappear her off the street, even though she had a valid student visa, the whole thing. It was just an op-ed.
And then we saw, my brother, union brother, David Huerta. He's the president of SEIU USWW, one of the California largest union. And that was another major shock for everyone. David, he's a really good friend and a colleague, and he has dedicated his life to fighting for low-wage immigrant workers. He was simply standing up for the rights of immigrants when he was violently arrested in Los Angeles. But I want to just here pause, because the outpour of support and concern for his well-being was truly, truly amazing. From you, Congresswoman, you were right there in one of the key actions right after the arrest, and many other leaders. We have about 32 actions across the country demanding that he be free. But not only that, demanding ICE to put an end to these raids. And then also we saw the support around the world. I mean, this was really, really incredible to see. We also very relieved that he has been reunited with his family, but he still faces charges of conspiracy to impede an officer. And we stand tall with our union brother, David Huerta, and we are just going to continue to just demand to these charges being dropped. And then we also, you mentioned some other members. So we have Cleona Ward and Lou Ellen Dixon, both who were detained in your home state
of Washington. She was released,
yes.
Auntie Lynn, as she was called, Lou Ellen Dixon, she was released the day before I went to do an unannounced inspection of the immigration detention center. So I'm so glad that you were able to get her released as well.
And Tora, as you said, these are regular working people, pillars of their families. Both are green card holders and longtime residents of the U.S., and they were detained after returning from trips overseas. Very proud union members. So one is a primary caregiver, and the other work in the healthcare industry. So also these victories show when working people stand together, we are powerful. but we know that thousands of workers remain unjustly detained and separated from their families, whose stories may never come to light. And I have to say this, and we know this, we will not stop fighting.
That's so exactly right. And it's kind of the perfect segue for me to ask you about you're doing this amazing thing called Justice Journeys. I think I got the name right. And so tell, you're an organizer, I'm an organizer. We know that courage is acting when you have fear, not in the absence of fear. And this is a moment that's going to call for everyone across the country to stand up and to speak out and to really be engaged. And so tell us about Justice Journeys, and also tell us about what people can do right now across the country that might be listening to support and to protect our immigrant communities and to fight back against this repressive regime that is locking up people who are essential to our economy, to our families, to our communities.
So I think we've been seeing it, the incredible support. We saw it in the No Kings.
Yes, wasn't that amazing?
It was just amazing, and where you were able to see the incredible support for immigrants was really great to see on the connect on all the issues that we all fighting to the America we want, but we want to the listeners, be an ally, show your support by attending these rallies. And this is also important. Bring your friends, bring your families. This is very, very important. Call your members of Congress and demand that they hold this administration accountable for these deplorable actions that are tearing apart families and communities. And also, if it comes down to it, be a witness. If you are a bystander in an ICE raid, you can record a video or remind the person that is being arrested that they have rights, that they have the right to remain silent, and they do not have to answer questions. This is the moment in which we have to choose to stand up and make it clear that this is not what we want America to be. And then, so let me just talk about a little bit of the justice journey that, we're very exciting, that is coming up. As you know, Louisiana is a major center in our country for the for-profit prison industry, which has made so much money from the disproportionate incarceration of Black men. So it is not a surprise that the Trump administration has sent the largest share of immigrants swept up by ICE to notorious detention centers here. Some estimate about 7,000 are housed there. So our own Rumesa Osterk was held for over a month in Basel, Louisiana, and Columbia University graduate student Mahmoud Khalil was held at a facility in Jena, Louisiana, before he was freed last week. So our members have had it. We know that Trump and his friends in the prison industry are profiting off of the detention and the suffering of countless of immigrants torn apart from their families in our community. So that's why we're launching this justice journey to Louisiana. So people from the West, the East, the North, and across the South, our members and allies are coming from all races and backgrounds. We're boarding buses to stand up in solidarity with immigrants and to demand an end to these cruel ICE raids. And along the way, also we stop in historical sites from the civil rights movement, honoring those who came before us, who sacrificed so much to fight against racial injustice. So Trump thinks that he can do what he wants and detain immigrants in Louisiana because he thinks no one will notice. Well, we are not going to let him. Also, the other part to just mention, as you know, Congresswoman, we're here for the long run. So there are going to be many moments, but first of all, it's just be an ally, join, speak
This
up.
is so important, and I think you've put it beautifully. And I think we've been doing this resistance lab training for people just to help people understand, how do you fight back against dictators and authoritarians? How do you fight back against the democratic backsliding? And I think one of the most incredible things to me is that one of the issues that people come with, and we've trained over 10,000 people from all 50 states, over almost 30,000 have signed up, and you can go to resistancelab.us to sign up. But the thing that really amazes me is immigration is always at the center of what people bring up. It is the thing that drives them to be so furious about the cruelty, about the crackdown on free speech, about the raids. And there are the most amazing stories of people who have come out when they see ICE agents going to a home in their neighborhood, and they surround the home. And they lock arms, and they don't allow the agents to be able to go into the home. At immigration courts, where people come out and they accompany, even the Pope himself has sent Catholic bishops to accompany people to their court appointments. And so I really do want people to hear your message, our message, that you have power, and it's about using it. It's about using it individually, but it's also about building that stronger collective movement and using the power we have to fight for the country we deserve and we are going to get. So I am so grateful to you for being with us today, and most of all for your incredible leadership and your beautiful, generous heart. And it's been such an honor to be a sister in the struggle with you for immigrant rights.
Thank you so much. And as always, we thank you for everything you do every day for all of us.
Thank you so much. My guest has been Rocío Sáenz, the Secretary Treasurer of SEIU